Jaden flips a bully in a shocking parking lot brawl. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell for thrilling stories every week. The school bell screamed, and Jaden's sneakers squeaked on the linoleum as he bolted through the crowded hallway. His heart hammering like a war drum. He'd barely made it through his first day at Lincoln High, a new kid in a sea of stairs, when Brad's voice had cut through the chatter like a blade. "Yo, new guy, you think you're tough, Brad?" All swagger and sneer, had cornered him at lunch, shoving Jaden's tray to the floor, ketchup splattering like blood. The cafeteria had gone quiet, eyes locked on the scene, but Jaden kept his head down, fists clenched. He wasn't here to fight. Not again. His old school's rumors fights he didn't start. Trouble he didn't want had followed him like a shadow. But Brad didn't know that. Brad didn't care. Now, as Jaden pushed through the double doors to the parking lot, the late afternoon sun burned his eyes, and Brad's taunts echoed behind him. "Run all you want, kid. You're mine." Jaden's backpack thudded against his spine, heavy with textbooks and the weight of starting over. He'd promised his mom he'd keep it together, promised himself he'd stay invisible. But Brad and his pack of jeering friends had other plans. They spilled out of the school, a half dozen of them, their laughter sharp and cruel. Jaden quickened his pace, weaving between parked cars, the asphalt radiating heat under his feet. He could hear their footsteps now, closing in, the jangle of keys, the low growl of Brad's voice. "Where you going, huh?" Adin's jaw tightened. He didn't want this, but running wasn't working. He stopped dead, turning to face them, his breath steadying like he'd been taught. Brad strutted forward, a blond kid with a wrestler's build, his Letterman jacket screaming privilege. The others fanned out, forming a loose circle, their phones already out, ready to capture whatever came next. "You deaf or just stupid?" Brad spat, cracking his knuckles. "I said, you think you're tough?" Jaden's eyes flicked to the crowd kids from school, some curious, some grinning, none stepping in. He caught a glimpse of a skinny kid with glasses, standing off to the side, his face unreadable. Noah. He'd heard someone call him in class. Noah didn't move, just watched. Jaden dropped his backpack, the zipper scraping the ground at a "I don't want trouble," he said, voice low. But Brad laughed, stepping closer, his fist already cocking back. The first punch came fast, aimed at Jaden's jaw, but Jaden was faster. He sidestepped, years of training made digging in, his body moving like water. Brad's fist hit air, and before he could recover, Jaden grabbed his arm, twisted, and used Brad's own momentum to flip him over his shoulder. Brad hit the asphalt with a sickening thud, his breath whooshing out, his eyes wide with shock. The crowd gasped, phones shaking in their hands. Brad scrambled to his feet, face red, pride bruised more than his body. "You're dead," he roared, charging again. But Jaden was ready. He ducked a wild swing, planted his foot, and swept Brad's legs out from under him. Brad went down hard, gravel biting into his palms. The circle of kids tightened, murmurs rippling through them, some cheering, some stunned. Jaden stood over Brad, chest heaving, his fist still up. But he didn't strike. "Stay down," he said, voice steady but sharp. Brad froze, his bravado crumbling under the weight of his own humiliation. The crowd was silent now, the air thick with tension. Jaden's eyes scanned the faces, landing on Noah again. The kid hadn't moved, but something in his expression had shifted respect. Maybe, or recognition. Brad's friends hesitated, unsure whether to jump in or back off. One of them, a lanky kid with a buzz cut, stepped forward, but Jaden's glare stopped him cold. "Anyone else?" Jaden asked, his voice carrying across the lot. No one moved. Brad coughed, still on his knees, and muttered something under his breath, but he didn't get up. The bell rang again, distant, signaling the end of after-school clubs, and the crowd started to scatter, whispering, phones, pocketing. Jaden grabbed his backpack, slinging it over his shoulder, his pulse still racing. He'd broken his promise already. His mom's face flashed in his mind, her tired eyes, her quiet hope that this school would be different. He started walking, head down, toward the bus stop, but Noah's voice stopped him. "Hey," Noah called, jogging to catch up, his glasses slipping down his nose. That was insane. "You okay?" Jaden didn't answer right away, just kept walking, but Noah kept pace, undeterred. "I've seen Brad pull that crap before," Noah said. "No one ever stands up to him." "Where'd you learn to fight like that?" Jaden glanced at him, wary. Noah didn't seem like the others, no smirk, no agenda, just curious. "Long story," Jaden said finally, his voice softer now. Noah nodded, like he got it, and for a moment they walked in silence. The hum of the city around them. The bus pulled up, brakes hissing, and Jaden climbed on, Noah lingering behind. As the doors closed, Jaden looked out the window, catching Noah's small wave. He didn't wave back, but something in his chest loosened, just a fraction. He'd survived day one, but he knew Brad wasn't done, not by a long shot. The bus lurched forward, and Jaden leaned his head against the glass, replaying the fight in his mind, wondering how long he could keep his past buried before it came for him again. Jaden's sneakers crunched gravel as he slipped through the school's back gate, the morning air sharp against his skin, his breath fogging in the early chill. Yesterday's fight in the parking lot played on a loop in his head, Brad's stunned face hitting the asphalt, the crowd's gasps, Noah's quiet wave. He'd barely slept, his mom's worried voice echoing from their cramped apartment kitchen. "You promised, Jay. No trouble?" But trouble had found him, like it always did. Now, as he ducked under the chain-link fence, avoiding the main entrance where eyes would follow, he felt the weight of every stare he'd dodged at his old school. Lincoln High was supposed to be a fresh start, but Brad's humiliation wouldn't stay buried. Jaden adjusted his backpack, his knuckles still sore from yesterday's grip, and headed toward the gym, where he'd heard the wrestling team practice early. He wasn't looking for Brad, not yet, but he needed to know the terrain, the places where a guy like Brad might corner him again. The gym doors were propped open, and the thump of bodies hitting mats spilled out. Jaden peered inside, catching sight of Brad, red-faced and barking orders at younger wrestlers. His Letterman jacket slung over a bench. Brad's eyes flicked up, locking onto Jaden's, and a smirk twisted his lips. "Well, look who's back," Brad called, loud enough to turn heads. The wrestlers paused, their glances darting between them. Jaden didn't flinch, just held Brad's stare, his pulse steady, like he was back in the dojo, facing a sparring partner. "Not here for you," Jaden said, voice low, and turned to leave. But Brad was already moving, crossing the gym in long strides. "You think you can walk away after yesterday?" Brad's voice was a growl, his buddies trailing him, their sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. Jaden kept walking, the hallway stretching out ahead, but the air shifted, heavy with intent. He heard the shuffle of feet behind him. Too many, and his instincts screamed. He spun just as Brad's fist swung, grazing his shoulder. Jaden dodged, grabbing Brad's wrist and twisting, but this time Brad was ready, wrenching free and shoving Jaden into a locker with a metallic clang. The impact rattled Jaden's teeth, but he pushed back, driving his shoulder into Brad's chest, sending them both stumbling. Brad's friends closed in, a blur of fists and shouts, and Jaden ducked a punch from the lanky buzzcut kid, landing a quick jab to his ribs. The hallway erupted, kids spilling out of classrooms, phones flashing, the chaos swelling like a storm. Jaden fought to keep his footing, his training keeping him sharp, but numbers weren't on his side. A fist caught his cheek, snapping his head back, and he tasted blood. Through the haze, he saw Noah, the skinny kid from yesterday, shoving through the crowd, his glasses glinting. "Back off," Noah yelled, his voice cracking, but firm, and he threw himself between Jaden and one of Brad's crew, taking a shove that sent him sprawling. Jaden seized the moment, grabbing Noah's arm and pulling him up, the two of them breaking free and sprinting down the hall, Brad's curses chasing them. They ducked into a stairwell, the door slamming shut, their breaths ragged in the dim light. "You didn't have to do that," Jaden panted, wiping blood from his lip. Noah adjusted his glasses, a bruise blooming on his arm. "Yeah, I did," he said, a small grin breaking through. "Brad's been running this place too long." Jaden studied him, the kid who'd barely spoken in class but had just jumped into a fight for him. "Why?" Jaden asked, and Noah shrugged, his eyes steady. "I'm tired of watching people get hurt." The stairwell was quiet now, the distant roar of the hallway fading. Jaden leaned against the wall, his mind racing. Brad wasn't just a bully, he was a problem. One that wouldn't stop unless someone made him. "You meant what you said yesterday?" Noah asked, breaking the silence. "About fighting?" Jaden nodded, his jaw tight. "I trained for years. My uncle's dojo kept me out of worse trouble." Noah's grin widened. "Then teach me. Teach all of us. The kids Brad picks on, they need to fight back." Jaden hesitated, the idea sparking something in him. But his mom's voice cut through again. "No trouble." He'd already broken that promise twice. But Noah's words stuck, and the image of those kids in the hallway, watching, waiting for someone to stand up, wouldn't leave him. "You think anyone would show up?" Jaden asked. And Noah laughed, sharp and sure. "After yesterday, half the school's talking about you." The bell rang, jarring them back to reality, and Noah pushed open the stairwell door. "Meet me after school, by the old track shed. I know some kids who'd come." Jaden followed, his steps lighter, the bruise on his cheek throbbing, but his mind clear. They split up, Noah heading to class, Jaden to the bathroom to clean the blood off his face. The mirror showed a kid he barely recognized, eyes hard, but not angry, determined. After school, the track shed was a rusted relic behind the football field, hidden by overgrown weeds. Noah was already there, with 3 other kids, a short girl with a braid, a lanky boy with a skateboard, and a quiet kid who kept his hood up. They looked at Jaden like he was something new, something dangerous. "You really took down Brad?" the girl asked, her voice skeptical but curious. Jaden nodded, dropping his backpack. "And I can teach you how." He started with the basic stance, balance, how to throw a punch without breaking your wrist. The kids listened, clumsy but eager, mimicking his moves as the sun dipped low. Noah was the quickest, his skinny frame hiding a surprising strength. By the time they finished, sweat soaked their shirts, and the quiet kid, Marcus, finally spoke. "Brad's not going to let this go," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Jaden met his eyes. "Neither are we." That night, Jaden lay on his bed, staring at the cracked ceiling, his phone buzzing with a text from Noah. "More kids want in. Tomorrow. Same spot." He didn't reply, just set the phone down, his mind on Brad, on the class, on the line he was crossing. He'd wanted to stay invisible, but invisibility wasn't an option anymore. Not here. Not now. Jaden, his fists clenched as he scanned the old track shed, now packed with a dozen kids practicing punches under the flickering fluorescent light, their shadows dancing on the rusted walls. The self-defense class had doubled in size overnight. Word of his takedown of Brad spreading like wildfire through Lincoln High's halls. Noah was at the front, leading a drill, his skinny frame moving with newfound confidence as he corrected a younger kid's stance. Jaden nodded, impressed, but his gut churned with unease. Brad wasn't the type to let a public humiliation slide. And the bigger this class got, the louder it screamed defiance. He'd caught glimpses of Brad's crew lingering near the football field, their eyes tracking him, waiting for a moment to strike. The air felt charged, like the second before a storm breaks. Jaden clapped his hands, pulling the group's attention, Focus up if you're here to fight smart, not just hard. The kids nodded, sweat beading on their foreheads. But before he could start the next drill, the shed's metal doors screeched open, slamming against the wall. A wave of laughter flooded in, sharp and mocking, and Jaden's heart kicked into overdrive. Brad strode in, flanked by his usual pack buzz-cut kid, a stocky guy with a neck tattoo, and a couple others, all grinning like they had already won. Brad held a fire extinguisher, its nozzle dangling like a weapon. "Nice little club," Brad sneered, his voice cutting through the sudden silence. "What's this? Karate Kids Hero Camp?" The class froze, some kids stepping back, others looking to Jaden. Noah moved to his side, glasses glinting, his jaw set. Jaden raised a hand, signaling calm, but his eyes locked on Brad's. "Get out," Jaden said, voice low, steady. Brad laughed, louder, and without warning, yanked the extinguisher's pin, spraying a choking cloud of white foam across the shed. The kid coughed, stumbling as the haze filled the air, stinging eyes and lungs. Jaden lunged forward, but Brad's crew was already moving, shoving desks and chairs, turning the shed into a maze of chaos. A fist flew from the fog, catching Jaden's shoulder, and he spun, blocking another hit from the buzz-cut kid. The shed erupted into a brawl, kids screaming, some fighting back, others scrambling for the door. Jaden ducked a chair swung by the tattooed guy, grabbing his arm and twisting until he dropped it. But the foam made the floor slick, and Jaden's feet slipped as Brad charged, slamming him into a wall. The impact knocked the breath from his lungs, but Jaden pushed off, tackling Brad to the ground, their bodies skidding through the foam. Brad's fist grazed Jaden's ear, but Jaden pinned his arm, his training keeping him focused despite the sting in his ribs. Nearby, Noah was grappling with Buzzcut, taking a hit but landing a clumsy punch that made the bigger kid stagger. The short girl with the braid, Lila, appeared from the haze, swinging a broom like a staff, driving another of Brad's crew back. The class was fighting, not just running, and the sight lit a fire in Jaden's chest. He tightened his grip on Brad, but Brad wriggled free, scrambling to his feet, his face twisted with rage. "You think this changes anything?" Brad spat, wiping foam from his eyes. "You're done here." He grabbed the extinguisher again, aiming it at Jaden, but Lila darted in, smacking it from his hands with her broom. The canister clattered across the floor, and Brad roared, lunging for her. But Jaden was faster, pulling Lila back and driving his shoulder into Brad's chest, sending him crashing into a stack of crates. The crates collapsed, wood splintering, and Brad stayed down, groaning. The fight slowed, Brad's crew hesitating as the foam settled, revealing the shed in ruins, chairs overturned, walls streaked with white, the class panting but standing tall. Noah wiped blood from his nose, grinning despite the bruise blooming on his cheek. "We held our own," he said, voice hoarse. Jaden nodded, his chest heaving, but his eyes stayed on Brad, who was pulling himself up. His bravado cracked but not broken. "This isn't over," Brad muttered, limping toward the door, his crew trailing him, their laughter gone. The shed was quiet now, the class gathering closer, some shaking, others buzzing with adrenaline. Lila tossed the broom aside, her braids swinging. "They'll be back," she said, matter of fact. Jaden met her gaze, then looked at the others. Marcus, the quiet kid, clutching a bruised knuckles. The skateboarder, checking a cut on his arm. The rest, wide-eyed but unbroken. "Then we'll be ready," Jaden said, his voice carrying a weight he hadn't felt before. Noah clapped a hand on his shoulder, and the group started cleaning up. Righting chairs, wiping foam, their chatter rising, defiant. But as Jaden helped stack crates, a cold realization hit him. Brad's prank wasn't just a stunt, it was a warning. He'd come for blood next time. And the class, brave as they were, wasn't ready for that. Jaden's mind raced, torn between shutting this down to keep them safe and pushing forward to give them a chance. He glanced at Noah, who was rallying the younger kids, and knew he couldn't walk away. Not now. The shed's door creaked as the last of the foam dripped to the floor, and Jaden felt the storm building again, closer, fiercer. Jaden's pulse thundered as he crouched behind the bleachers, the evening air thick with the scent of cut grass and tension. The football field's floodlights buzzed overhead, casting long shadows across Lincoln High's empty stands. But the quiet felt like a trap. 2 days had passed since Brad's crew trashed the self-defense class, and whispers in the halls said Brad was planning something big. Jaden had told the group to lay low, but Noah insisted on meeting tonight, claiming he had overheard Brad's crew plotting near the locker rooms. Now Jaden waited, his breath shallow, eyes scanning the field for Noah or trouble. The self-defense class had become more than a project, it was a stand, and Jaden felt its weight on his shoulders. He'd seen the spark in Lila's eyes, the way Marcus stood taller, the way even the skateboarder, Ethan, stopped slouching. They trusted him, and that trust was a blade, sharp and heavy. A twig snapped, and Jaden tensed, his hand tightening around the edge of a bleacher. Noah emerged from the shadows, glasses glinting, his hoodie zipped tight. "They're coming," Noah whispered, crouching beside him. Brad and his guys. Locker room. 10 minutes. Jaden's jaw clenched. "You sure?" Noah nodded, his face pale but set. "Heard him talking about finishing it." Sounded personal. Jaden's mind raced, Brad's ego was bruised, but this felt different, darker. He stood, motioning Noah to follow, and they slipped toward the locker room, keeping to the shadows. The school loomed like a fortress, its brick walls swallowing sound. Jaden's sneakers were silent on the pavement, years of training keeping his steps light, but Noah's breaths were loud, nervous. "You don't have to do this," Jaden muttered, pausing at a corner. Noah shot him a look. "I'm in." Jaden nodded, a flicker of respect cutting through his focus, and they moved on. The locker room door was ajar, a sliver of light spilling out, and low voices echoed inside. Jaden peered through the kiss, spotting at Brad and his crew buzz cut, the tattooed guy, and 2 others, all hunched over a gym bag. Brad was pacing, his voice sharp. He thinks he's some hero. Tonight, he's done. Jaden's blood ran cold as Brad pulled a pair of brass knuckles from the bag, slipping them onto his fist. Noah gripped Jaden's arm, eyes wide, but Jaden shook him off, his mind narrowing to the threat. He signaled Noah to stay put and ease the door open. Slipping inside, the locker room smelled of sweat and bleach, its fluorescent lights harsh. Jaden stayed low, moving between rows of lockers, his heart a steady drum. Brad's crew didn't notice, too caught up in their plan. But as Jaden got closer, the tattooed guy turned, his eyes narrowing. "Who's there?" he barked, and Jaden froze, his back against a locker. Brad spun, brass knuckles gleaming, and smirked. "Well, look who's early." The crew fanned out, cutting off Jaden's escape, and he stood, fists up, his training kicking in. "You're making this too easy," Brad said, stepping forward, his knuckles glinting. Jaden didn't answer, just watched Brad's stance, the way his weight shifted, sloppy, overconfident. The first punch came fast, brass flashing, but Jaden sidestepped, grabbing Brad's arm and twisting, forcing him to his knees. The crew lunged, and the locker room exploded into chaos. Buzzcut swung a metal water bottle, clipping Jaden's shoulder. But Jaden ducked low, sweeping Buzzcut's legs, sending him crashing into a bench. The tattooed guy charged, and Jaden met him head-on, blocking a punch and landing a sharp elbow to his ribs. Pain flared in Jaden's shoulder, but he pushed through, his body a machine honed by years in the dojo. Noah burst through the door, shouting, and threw a gym towel at one of Brad's guys. distracting him long enough for Jaden to knock him down. Brad was back on his feet, brass knuckles swinging, and Jaden barely dodged, the metal grazing his cheek, drawing blood. He tackled Brad, slamming him against the locker, the clang echoing like a gunshot. Brad's knuckles fell, skittering across the floor, and Jaden pinned him, his forearm against Brad's throat. "Enough," Jaden growled, but Brad laughed, hoarse and unhinged. "You're screwed now," he spat, just as a flashlight beam cut through the room. "Break it up," a voice boomed a security guard. Radio crackling, his boots heavy on the tile. Jaden released Brad, stepping back, his chest heaving. The guard grabbed Buzz Cut, who was still on the floor, and barked at the others to stay put. Noah was at Jaden's side, panting, a bruise blooming on his jaw. Brad glared, but his crew was rattled, their plan in pieces. The guard's radio buzzed with a call to the principal, and Jaden's stomach dropped. This wasn't just a fight anymore, it was trouble. The kind that could end with him out of school for good. As the guard herded them toward the office, Noah muttered, "Worth it." Jaden didn't answer, his mind on the class, on Lila and Marcus and Ethan, on the kids who'd fought back in the shed. They'd held their own there, and tonight, he and Noah had too. But Brad's words stuck. "You're screwed now," and Jaden knew this was far from over. The office lights were blinding, the principal's voice a low drone as she demanded explanations. Jaden stayed silent, his cheeks stinging, his shoulder throbbing, but his resolve hardening. He'd started something, and no matter what came next, he wasn't backing down. Jaden sat rigid in the principal's office, the fluorescent lights buzzing like a swarm of angry wasps, his cheeks still stinging from the locker room brawl. The air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and tension. The principal's desk a fortress of papers and disapproval. Brad slouched across from him, his brass knuckles confiscated, his smirk barely hiding the bruise on his jaw. Noah fidgeted beside Jaden, glasses fogged with nervous sweat, while Brad's crew buzz cut and the tattooed guy glared from the corner, their defiance muted under the principal's steely gaze. Miss Carter, the principal, leaned forward, her voice sharp as a blade. "This school has a zero-tolerance policy for violence. You're all facing suspension, maybe expulsion." Jaden's stomach twisted, his mom's face flashing in his mind her late-night shifts, her quiet faith in this new school. He'd promised her a clean slate. But now, with the guard's report of brass knuckles in a trashed locker room, that promise was ash. Brad's eyes flicked to him, smug, like he'd already won by dragging Jaden down with him. The door creaked open, and a teacher, Mr. Ruiz, stepped in, his face grim. "Miss Carter, we've got student outside. They're asking to speak." Carter's brow furrowed, but she nodded, and Jaden's pulse quickened as Lila, Marcus, and Ethan pushed into the room, their self-defense class badges pinned to their backpacks. Lila's braids swung as she stepped forward, her voice steady despite the room's weight. "Jaden's not the problem. He's teaching us to stand up, not start fights." Marcus, usually silent, cleared his throat. "Brad's been targeting kids for years. Jaden's the only one who's done anything about it." Ethan, clutching his skateboard, nodded. "Check the hallway cameras." Brad's crew jumped him first. Carter's eyes narrowed, but Jaden saw a flicker of doubt. Brad scoffed, leaning back, but his crew shifted, uneasy. The principal tapped her pen, then turned to the guard. "Pull the footage." The wait was agony, the clock ticking like a bomb. Jaden's mind raced every fight, every move he'd made, played back in sharp detail. He'd acted on instinct, protected Noah, protected the class, but instinct didn't erase consequences. Noah nudged him, whispering, "They've got your back." Jaden glanced at Lila, Marcus, Ethan, and the other kids now crowding the doorway, their faces fierce with loyalty. The class he'd started in the track shed had grown into something unstoppable, and that spark kept him steady. The guard returned, plugging a laptop into a projector. Grainy footage flickered on the wall, Brad slipping on brass knuckles. His crew circling Jaden. The ambush clear as day. Brad's smirk vanished, his face paling as Carter's expression hardened. "This changes things," she said, her voice ice. She turned to Brad. "You're suspended, pending a full investigation. Your parents will be called." Brad's jaw dropped, his voice rising. "You can't." He started it, but Carter cut him off by pointing to the door. "Out, now." Brad's crew shuffled out, heads low, and Jaden exhaled, relief warring with dread. Carter's gaze landed on him. "You're not off the hook. Jaden, fighting even in self-defense, has consequences. I need to speak with your guardian." Jaden nodded, his throat tight, knowing his mom's disappointment would hurt worse than any punch. But as he stood to leave, Lila grabbed his arm. "We're not letting them pin this on you," she whispered, her eyes blazing. Outside, the hallway was alive with students, word of the footage spreading fast. Some cheered, others whispered, but the self-defense class kids formed a tight circle around Jaden and Noah, their presence a shield. Marcus handed Jaden a crumpled note. "More kids want to join. Track shed, tomorrow." Jaden tucked it in his pocket, his resolve hardening. The class wasn't just surviving, it was growing, pulling in kids who'd never dared fight back before. By the next day, the track shed was bursting. Nearly 20 students packed inside, practicing jabs and blocks under Noah's lead. Jaden watched from the side, his shoulder still sore, his mom's voice from last night echoing, "You're better than this, Jay." She'd cried when Carter called, but she'd also listened when Jaden explained the class, the kids, the change he was trying to make. She hadn't grounded him yet, but her trust hung by a thread. Lila approached, tossing him a water bottle. "Heard Brad's out for a week. His crew's quiet, but they're pissed." Jaden nodded, scanning the group. A new kid, a freshman with a limp, was struggling with a punch, but his eyes burned with determination. Jaden walked over, adjusting his stance, and the kid grinned, landing a clean hit on the pad. The shed buzzed with energy, but Jaden felt the storm brewing. Brad's suspension wasn't the end, he pulled Noah aside. "We need to train harder. Brad's not done, and next time he'll hit us where it hurts." Noah adjusted his glasses, his grin sharp. "Then we hit back together." That night, Jaden lay awake, the note from Marcus in his hand. The class was a lifeline, but it was also a target. He thought of the freshman's grin, Lila's fire, Noah's courage, and knew he couldn't stop. Not when they believed in him. Not when they were finally fighting back. Jaden's breath caught as he sprinted across the school courtyard, the dusk sky bruising purple, the air sharp with the threat of rain. The self-defense class had just wrapped at the track shed, the group's energy electric after weeks of training. But Noah's urgent text Brad's back, targeting Marcus. Quad, now had sent Jaden running. Marcus, the quiet kid who'd barely spoken when the class started, had become a cornerstone, his steady presence calming the younger students. If Brad was going after him, it wasn't random. Jaden's sneakers pounded the pavement, his pulse a war drum, as he spotted a crowd forming near the quad's flagpole. Shouts sliced through the evening, and he pushed through the onlookers, his heart sinking. Marcus stood cornered against a brick wall, his hoodie torn, blood trickling from his lip. Brad loomed over him, his crew circling like wolves' buzz cut, the tattooed guy, and a new face, a hulking kid with a scar across his eyebrow. Brad's suspension had ended that morning, and he'd wasted no time. "You think you're tough now," Brad snarled, shoving Marcus, who stumbled but didn't fall, his fists clenched, mimicking the stance Jaden had taught him. The crowd murmured, phones out, but no one stepped in. Jaden shoved forward, shouting, "Brad, Back off, Brad's head snapped up, his grin feral. Right on time, he said, and before Jaden could react, the hulking kid lunged, his fist slamming into Jaden's ribs. Pain exploded, but Jaden twisted, grabbing the kid's arm and flipping him onto the grass. Years of dojo training keeping him sharp. The crowd gasped, but Brad's crew was already moving. Buzzcut swinging a wild punch that Jaden ducked, countering with a sharp jab to his chest. Marcus seized the moment, tackling the tattooed guy, landing clumsy but effective hits. The quad became a battlefield, fists flying, shouts echoing, the crowd swelling with chaos. Jaden fought to reach Marcus, but Brad was relentless, grabbing a metal water bottle from the ground and swinging it at Jaden's head. Jaden dodged, the bottle grazing his ear, and tackled Brad, their bodies crashing into the flagpole with a clang. Brad's breath hissed out, but he laughed, unhinged, his eyes burning. "You can't save them all," he spat, just as a scream cut through the noise. Jaden's head whipped around Lila, braid flying, had jumped into the fray, pulling a younger girl, Sarah, from the tattooed guy's grip. Sarah, a shy freshman who joined the class last week, was shaking, her glasses cracked. The sight of her fear lit a fire in Jaden's chest, and he drove his knee into Brad's stomach, sending him to his knees. But the hulking kid was back, grabbing Jaden from behind, his arm like a vice. Jaden struggled, his ribs screaming, when Noah burst through the crowd, swinging a backpack like a club, catching the kid's jaw. The grip loosened, and Jaden broke free, spinning to face Brad, who was scrambling up, his face twisted with rage. The crowd parted, and the self-defense class poured in Ethan, skateboard tucked under his arm, landing a punch, the freshman with the limp, jabbing with surprising force. Others, all fighting with the moves Jaden had drilled into them. They weren't just defending Marcus, they were defending each other. A unit forged in the track shed. Brad's crew faltered, outnumbered, and the hulking kid backed off, clutching his jaw. Buzzcut swung at Lila, but she blocked, twisting his arm until he yelped. The tattooed guy winded, retreated, and Brad stood alone, his water bottle clattering to the ground. "You're done," Jaden said, voice low, his chest heaving. Brad's eyes darted, his bravado cracking as the crowd's cheers turned against him, phones capturing every moment. Marcus stepped forward, wiping blood from his lip, his voice steady. "We're not scared anymore." Brad froze, his crew gone, his power slipping. A teacher's shout broke the moment, staff pushing through, pulling students apart. Jaden helped Sarah to her feet, her hands trembling but her eyes fierce. Noah clapped at Marcus on the back, and Lila rallied the class, their faces bruised but unbroken. The teachers herded everyone toward the office. But the crowd's whispers were different now, Brad's name laced with contempt. The classes with respect. In the office, Ms. Carter's face was a storm, her voice sharp as she demanded answers. The footage from phones flooded in, showing Brad's attack on Marcus, the class's defense, Sarah's rescue. Carter's eyes softened as Sarah spoke, her voice small but clear, describing how the class gave her courage. Brad's head hung, his defiance gone, the weight of evidence crushing him. Jaden stood silent, his ribs aching, knowing the fight had exposed Brad's cruelty, but also risked everything he'd built. Carter dismissed Brad with a warning of permanent expulsion, then turned to Jaden. "Your class is changing things," she said, her tone grudging but impressed. "But no more fights, or you're all out." Jaden nodded, relief flooding him, but his mind was on the class, on Sarah's cracked glasses, on Marcus's bloodied lip. They'd won tonight, but the cost was high, and the victory felt fragile. As they left the office, the class gathered in the hall, their chatter defiant, their bond ironclad. Noah grinned, his bruise glowing. "We did it," he said, but Jaden's gaze lingered on the quad, where the flagpole stood like a sentinel. Brad was down, But hate like his didn't vanish. It festered. Jaden knew the class had to stay ready, not just for Brad, but for what came next. Jaden's heart slammed against his ribs as he stood in the packed auditorium, the air thick with the buzz of fluorescent lights and the weight of 100 eyes boring into him. The disciplinary hearing felt like a cage, every seat filled with parents, teachers, and students. Their whispers a low roar. Miss Carter, the principal, sat at the head of the panel, her face a mask of steel, flanked by two board members whose pens scratched like knives. Brad slouched nearby, his usual swagger replaced by a tense scowl, his knuckles bruised from the quad fight. Noah, Lila, Marcus, and Sarah stood behind Jaden, their self-defense class badges glinting defiantly, their silence louder than any shout. Jaden's mom sat in the front row, her hands knotted, her eyes a mix of fear and faith. He'd promised her last night, voice cracking, to fight for the truth. But now, with expulsion on the line, that promise felt like a fraying rope. Carter's voice sliced through the tension, sharp and final. This school will not tolerate chaos. Brad, your history of violence is clear. Jaden, your class has sparked change, but your fights risk everything. Convince us why you belong here. The words landed like a punch, and Jaden's pulse spiked, his mind racing through every clash Brad's brass knuckles, Marcus's bloodied lip, Sarah's cracked glasses. Brad spoke first, his voice oily, practiced. I messed up, but he's the instigator. His class is a mob, picking fights. The crowd stirred, some parents nodding, others frowning. But Carter's glare silenced them. Jaden stepped forward, his throat burning, but his resolve afire. I didn't want to fight, he said, voice steady, ringing to the rafters. I wanted a fresh start, but Brad targeted me. Then Marcus, then Sarah. The class isn't about hurting, it's about standing up. It's about kids like us, who've had enough. He met his mom's eyes, her nod a lifeline, and pressed on. We're not the problem. Bullies like him are. The auditorium erupted, students cheering, parents gasping, and Carter banged her gavel, demanding order. Lila jumped in, her braids snapping as she spoke. Jaden taught us to protect, not attack. Brad's been terrorizing kids for years, Sarah, trembling but fierce. Added, I was invisible until the class. Now I fight back. Marcus, voice low but cutting, said, Jaden showed us we're not nothing. The board's pens paused, their faces softening. But Brad's dad, a hulking man in a tie, surged to his feet, voice booming. This kid's a thug. My son's no angel, but he's being framed. The crowd tensed, students shifting, some shouting support for Jaden, others for Brad. The room teetered on chaos, and Jaden's fists clenched, ready for anything. Then a shocked Mr. Ruiz, the history teacher, stood, holding a stack of papers, his face grim. I've got statements, he said, voice shaking but firm. Dozens of students, some anonymous, detailing Brad's bullying, lockers trashed, kids cornered, threats recorded on phones. He handed the papers to Carter, who scanned them, her eyes narrowing. The crowd hushed, parents leaning forward as Carter read aloud a freshman's account of Brad stealing his lunch money, a sophomore's story of being shoved into a dumpster, Sarah's own words about hiding in bathrooms. Brad's face paled, his dad's bluster fading. Carter held up a phone, playing a grainy audio clip, Brad's voice, clear and cruel, threatening Marcus days before the quad. The auditorium went silent. The truth, a hammer. Carter's gaze locked on Brad. This is systemic. Your actions end here. Brad's dad tried to interrupt, but Carter cut him off, her voice ice. Enough, the board whispered, their decision a low hum, and Jaden's chest tightened, his mom's hand now on his shoulder, her warmth grounding him. A new twist hit Ethan, the skateboarder, stepped forward, His voice raw. There's a video. From the quad. Not on phones yet. He handed Carter a USB drive, and Jaden's breath caught. Ethan hadn't mentioned this. The projector flickered, showing Brad slamming Marcus against the wall. The class's defense. Lila pulling Sarah free. The crowd roared, students chanting Jaden's name, and Brad's dad sank into his seat. Defeated. Carter stood. Her verdict, a thunderclap. Brad, you're expelled. Permanently. Security. Escort him out. Brad's eyes widened, his voice a desperate rasp. You can't. But guards were already moving. His dad silent as they left, the door slamming like a gavel. Carter turned to Jaden, her tone softer but stern. Your class is a force, but it's a risk. No more fights, or you're gone. Clear, Jaden nodded, relief crashing through him. Though the warning burned, the crowd exploded, students rushing the stage, Noah laughing, Lila hugging Sarah, Marcus grinning wide. Carter raised a hand, silencing them. We're launching an anti-bullying task force, built on your class's model. Jaden, you'll advise it. Don't make me regret this. Jaden froze, stunned, a spark of purpose igniting. The auditorium emptied, the class gathering outside, their voices alive with triumph. Noah punched Jaden's arm, grinning. You're a legend. Jaden shook his head, glancing at his mom, who pulled him into a fierce hug. You fought for what's right, she whispered, tears in her eyes. The quad stretched out beyond them, the flagpole gleaming under the stars, and Jaden felt the school shift a place where fear was losing ground. But as he joined the class, their laughter echoing, he knew this victory was only a step. The real fight for trust, for change was just beginning. Well, Jaden stood in the center of the school gym, the polished floor gleaming under the morning sun, the air alive with the chatter of students packed into the bleachers. Lincoln High's first anti-bullying assembly was underway, and Jaden, in a crisp school polo with his self-defense class badge pinned to his chest, felt the weight of every eye on him. Noah, Lila, Marcus, Sarah, and Ethan flanked him, their faces bright with pride, their bruises from weeks of battles now faded scars of victory. The gym walls were draped with banners. Stand up, speak out, and Ms. Carter stood at a podium, her voice booming through the mic. Today, we launch a new chapter for our school, inspired by students who refuse to stay silent. She nodded at Jaden, and the crowd erupted, cheers shaking the rafters. Jaden's mom sat in the front row, her smile wide, her hands clasped with quiet joy. The memory of her tears after the hearing still lingered, but now her pride was a fire that kept Jaden steady. He scanned the crowd, spotting familiar faces, kids from the class, new recruits, even teachers who'd once eyed him with suspicion. But one face was missing: Brad, expelled, gone. His shadow lifted from the halls. Yet Jaden knew change wasn't that simple, and the real test was what came next. Carter stepped aside, gesturing for Jaden to speak. His throat tightened, but he took the mic, his voice steady despite the butterflies in his gut. This isn't about fighting, he said, the gym falling silent. It's about standing up. For yourself, for each other. We're stronger together. The crowd roared again, and Noah grinned, whispering. Nailed it. Lila nudged Sarah, who waved shyly, her new glasses glinting. Marcus clapped Jaden's shoulder, his rare smile a beacon. Ethan spun his skateboard, whooping, and the energy surged, unstoppable. But as Jaden handed the mic back, a stir rippled through the bleachers. A figure stood at the gym's entrance, hesitant, head low. Jaden's breath caught Brad, not expelled after all, or maybe back for a final stand. The crowd hushed, tension spiking, and Carter's eyes narrowed, her hand hovering near her radio. Brad stepped forward. No crew, no smirk, just a kid in a plain hoodie, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. The gym was a powder keg, every student waiting for the spark. Jaden's fists clenched, his body coiled, ready for whatever Brad brought. But Brad didn't charge. He stopped a few feet away, his voice low, cracked. "I'm not here to fight," he said, barely audible. I was wrong." The words landed like a grenade, the crowd gasping, some scoffing, others leaning forward. Jaden froze, his instincts screaming trap. But Brad's eyes met his, raw, unguarded. "I messed up." Brad continued, louder now, hurting people, acting like I owned this place. "I saw what you did. Jaden, the class, the way kids aren't scared anymore. I want to fix what I broke." The gym was silent, the air thick with disbelief. Noah's jaw dropped, Lila's eyes narrowed, and Marcus crossed his arms, skeptical. Sarah whispered, "Is he serious?" Jaden's mind raced Brad's cruelty, the brass knuckles, Marcus's blood, Sarah's fear. Forgiveness wasn't easy, not after everything. But he thought of his mom's words. Strength isn't just fighting, it's building something better. He stepped forward, close enough to see the sweat on Brad's brow. "Words don't fix it," Jaden said, voice firm but not cruel. "Prove it." Brad nodded, swallowing hard. "I will." Carter intervened, her tone cautious but open. Brad's expulsion was overturned on appeal, with conditions. He's on probation, and he's joining the anti-bullying program under your supervision. "Jaden?" The crowd murmured, some protesting, others intrigued. Jaden's stomach twisted. Trusting Brad was a gamble, but shutting him out risked fueling the same hate they'd fought against. He glanced at his class, their faces a mix of doubt and resolve, and nodded. "We'll see." The assembly moved on, Carter outlining the program workshops, peer mentors, a hotline for bullied kids. Jaden's class was his heart, training students to mediate, to stand tall, to heal. As the crowd dispersed, Brad lingered, awkward, and Noah approached, glasses glinting. "One wrong move, and you're done," Noah said, half joking, half serious. Brad nodded, no argument, and walked away, the gym doors swinging shut behind him. Outside, the quad basked in sunlight, the flagpole a quiet sentinel. The class gathered, their laughter lighter now, their bond unbreakable. Lila punched Jaden's arm. "You're stuck with us, hero." Marcus handed him a new badge, etched with leader, and Sarah hugged him, her shyness gone. Ethan spun his board, grinning. "This school's ours now." Jaden laughed, the sound free, real. His mom joined them, her arm around his shoulders. "You built this," she said, and Jaden shook his head, looking at his friends. "We did." Weeks later, the anti-bullying program was thriving, kids reporting incidents without fear. Brad shadowing Jaden cautiously, his actions small but earnest, helping a freshman with a locker, apologizing to Marcus. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Jaden walked the halls, no longer the new kid, no longer invisible. He was home. The track shed, once a hideout, was now a training hub, packed with students every day, their punches sharp, their voices loud. Jaden watched them, his chest full, knowing this was just the start. Lincoln High wasn't perfect, but it was better because they'd fought for it, together. Jaden turned the Bullies' reign into a movement for justice, uniting a school. Thanks for listening. To like, share, subscribe, and hit the bell for more epic tales.